Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure really to be here with you all and in some way open the Brazil Water Week with this pre-session. As you know, obtaining substantial resources that are needed to reach the goals set in the Sustainable Development Goals, that is ensuring universal water and sanitation access and services for all, and improving the quality of water services will require the effective channeling of contributions from users, from the state, and from donors, whether they are bilateral or multilateral donors or local banks. The great demand for investments in infrastructure, particularly for water and sanitation services in the coming years, requires not only efforts, but also very innovative mechanisms for the expansion and also for greater efficiency of credit operations, both on the part of banks, but also from financing entities at the national, but also at the multilateral level, as well as by raising funds by service providers and borrowers. So ESG actions in companies and new instruments such as green bonds, blended financing, are good examples of alternatives that can boost these investments in the sanitation sector. As some Latin American countries have already done, such as Chile, Colombia, for instance, which already successfully use these mechanisms, and Brazil is also one of them. This session is really dedicated to identifying all these alternatives used in other countries and sectors, and discussing the conditions necessary for the sanitation sector to benefit from these options. We are very fortunate to have with us on this panel today 4 speakers from different backgrounds, different institutions, who are going to share with us their experience with those innovative mechanisms, how they were applied. My name is Corinne Cathala. I work in the Water and Sanitation Division at the IDB, the Inter-American Development Bank in Washington, D.C., and I will be your moderator today. Just for some technical aspects, I will ask the speakers today to turn off their camera if they are not speaking, turn on the camera only when they speak, and have the microphone also shut down if they don't present, and use the interpretation button in order to, when they speak English, to turn on the English version. And with that, I will start with our first panelist, which is with Diana Parra. Diana is an economist from the University of the Andes in Colombia. She holds a master's degree in business administration from the University of Edinburgh in Scotland. Diana has extensive experience in the financial aspects of major public and private companies in the public sector. She was deputy economic manager of the Transmilenio in Colombia. She was also budget manager of the Ministry of Finance of Bogotá and the division chief in the Public Investment Department of the National Office of Planning in Bogotá as well. In the financial sector, Diana was manager of credit risk in Bancolombia and vice president of finance in FIT Colombia as well. She's been an advisor for the implementation of financial inclusion program financed by USAID, and also in consulting assignments from the national government and the private sector. Today, Diana is currently the financial manager in the utility that provides water and sanitation services in Bogotá, which is the largest water utility in Colombia, called ACUEDUCTO de Bogotá. This is the city that serves, that provides water and sanitation services to Colombia's capital, Bogotá. So without any further ado, I will give you the floor, Diana, for this presentation. Just to remind you that all the questions will be at the end of the session. Thank you. Diana, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Corinne, for the presentation. I'm glad of participating in this special session about innovative financing and credit mechanisms, mainly green bonds and blended financing. Good morning to all and to my colleagues in this session. I will share the presentation then. Please let me know if you can see the presentation already.
Yes, Diana, we can see. I can see it at least.
Okay. Okay, so let's begin. So I am very happy to have the opportunity of sharing the experience of the Acueducto of Bogotá in the development of a green bonds and blended financing strategy to increase water resilience in Bogotá city. To begin, please let me first tell you a bit more about our company. The Acueducto of Bogotá is a publicly owned utility company that provides aqueduct and sanitary and rainwater runoff sewer services in Bogotá for the last 133 years. Our residential coverage is more than 99% for the water service and more than 98% for the sanitary and rainwater runoff sewer service. You can see in the left-hand side of the presentation, this is the map of Bogotá. In the map of Bogotá, we usually show it in the north. The north is not on the up part, but on the left part. This is the north, the south, because the city has developed from north to south over down the eastern hills of the Andean Mountains, which are here. So this is our natural resource for water, the eastern hills of the Andean Mountains. So you can see here the one of the main paramos of the world, which is called the Paramo of Chingaza. And here we have all the system of water supply network in yellow, the storm drain network in green, the sanitation drain network in orange. We have at the west side of the city the river, the Bogotá River, which is the most important river in the city, and the rivers that end in the Bogotá River, which are three main rivers: the Salitre River, the Fucha River, and the Tunjuelo River. Our main goal is to rehabilitate these rivers and the Bogotá River. So the company comprehensively manages the water resource through activities that includes water system conservation, surface water withdrawal, and treatment and distributions. We have one treatment plant here called Salitre, and we will build in the next year a second plant here at the south, which will be called Canoas. We, as Corinne explained, we are the largest water and sanitation utility in Colombia. We have more than 2 million subscribers only in Bogotá, and we also attend 11 neighboring municipalities, which are translating into populations. We serve more than 10 million populations, which represent 20% of the total population of Colombia. So, which are the climate-related risks for water management that we are facing? Well, the climate change scenarios run by the IDM, which is the Colombian Research Institute on Climate Issues, expect that we will have two main related climate threats in the city. Ones are due to water excess, and the other ones due to water scarcity. Related the threats due to water excess, we are experiencing already floods, mass movements, and torrential floods all over the country. But in the case of Bogotá, it is expected that during the next 20 years, there will be a 10 to 30% increase in rainfall in the Bogotá region, with the risks of flooding due to ponding and overflow, and also landslide in the city and adjacent areas. The second threat, which are the climate-related threats in the city due to water scarcity, we have forest fires, mainly in the eastern hills, reduced precipitations and droughts, and also urban heat islands risks. In the case of Bogotá, this institute expect increase in the risk of shortage in periods of reduced precipitation. For this reason, green finance will help us attain resilience in the water sectors by strengthening the company's adaptation capacity to climate change. How? Well, we are one of our main goals is aligning our financial strategy with our sustainability strategy, because we are betting on sustainable modernization. We also are diversifying our sources of finances by accessing new financiers, and we are supporting our commitment to sustainable water management. Here in the map to the left, we show the company's properties, because we are the steward of the conservation areas for water supply. We also care about all the water bodies in the urban area, as is shown in the map. So how we develop green finance at the company? Well, with the support of the IDB and the Swiss Cooperation through the Compass program, during 2021, we made significant advances in developing green finance. First of all, we identified a green project portfolio of 139 projects, which are worth more than $240 million in the period 2020-2022. We also established the company's green finance framework, and we went through the second party opinion process that resulted in the framework's approval under the International Capital Markets Association standards, the Loan Markets Associations, and the Climate Bonds Initiative. We went through this process during 20 and 21, and it's been a process in which we have learned a lot. It was not easy, but I think we have overcome the challenges that we faced developing these activities. So I'm going to share with you like the main challenges we faced last year, structuring the green bond and green finance strategy. Well, the first challenge that we had is that we had to learn everything about green financing. This is a new concept for the company. The company haven't had the need to get financing during the last 20 years. So we are new in financing at all during these last years, and green finance is a new concept. So we had to learn like everything about this new concept. One of the most interesting things in this stage was that we had to work together as a company with different areas, like we like in the financial areas, finance is only a matter of financial areas, but in this case, green finance is something that you have to design and implement working together with another areas. In this case, the environmental area of the company and the financial area led this process. In the first stage of developing the green portfolio, the environmental area led this process together with the other areas of the company. So they had to explain the concept of green financing. We had to attend webinars, carry out one-to-one meetings to explain to the other areas of the company, mainly the areas that carry out the projects of the company, what is green finance about. The second challenge that we had was that in the process of identifying green projects, we found out that we had lots of information, but not organized in the ways in which they were required to determine the green portfolio of projects. So we had to have several meetings, mainly with the project leaders, to get this information organized in the ways required to determine if the projects were or qualified as green projects. This, of course, demanded significant time and effort in the different areas of the company. Also, we had another challenge was to decide and choose what environmental impact indicators we needed to use to measure the impacts of the projects that were going to be selected. We've also found out that even though the company already had reports regarding sustainability performance, the indicators were not the ones that we required to qualify and to make then the monitoring and report of the benefits of the green financing projects. And also another aspect that I think this was more an opportunity was that we had communication between the finance and environmental offices like all the time. So this was interesting because in the financial area, we had to learn about green finance, about environmental issues. And in the environmental area, they had to learn about financial issues. So this required a very important teamwork to achieve and get the green bond portfolio, the framework, and then to get the second party opinion. Well, let me tell you a bit more about our green project portfolio. Well, the green project portfolio has the goal of attaining resilience in the water sector and thus mitigate the company's contribution to climate change. So we classified the 139 projects in 7 categories. We were able to do all this with the technical support of IDB and with the resources of the Swiss cooperation. This technical support was fundamental to get this portfolio. We classified our projects in water projects, sewage, renewable energy, research, hydrological monitoring, wastewater treatment plant, and nature-based solutions. In each classification, we also designed the monitoring and perform indicators. We had an eligibility criteria and we also identified the SDG goals pertaining to each classification. Where we are now, well, we finished the process of the second party opinion at the end of last year, but the challenges have not finished. We still have a lot of work to do to issue a green finance and a green and specifically a green bond. Our next steps for issuing a green bonds are, first, as a company, we need to implement the international financial reporting standards. The company has the IFRS already, but not the full IFRS required to issue a green bond. We are carrying out this process during this year. It will take us the whole year to implement these international financial reporting standards. And when we have these new reporting standards, we will be able to issue the green bond. We will also structure, we will need also to structure the bond issue. The bond issue, we will do that at the end of this year so that we will be ready with the reporting standards and the structure of the bond issued at the beginning of 2023. So our goal is to issue the green bond in the next year. And we also need to, we already have the indicators to monitor the projects, the green portfolio project, but we need to implement the reporting system by the time that we will issue the green bond so that we can fulfill all the requirements for the monitoring of the use of the financing. So we need to carry out this in 2023 as well. So this is what I wanted to share with you. The rehabilitation of the Bogotá River is a commitment of all here in Bogotá, in our region, and in the country. We will be carrying out very important projects such as the water treatment plant of Canoas during the next year. This water treatment plant will allow to rehabilitate the Bogotá River. This is going to be the third water treatment plant in Latin America, the first one in Colombia, of course, and one of the main treatment plants in the world. So we are dedicated to this important project during these days as well. So, well, muito obrigado for the invitation to share the experience of Acueducto de Bogotá in this panel. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Diana, for this very interesting presentation. And we will go now to our second panelist. Isabelle Braly-Cartillier. Isabelle is a senior financial specialist in the connectivity, markets, and finance division of the IDB. She's working with sovereign clients and also public development banks on the development of thematic bonds markets in Latin America and the Caribbean. And her other areas of focus are also environmental and social safeguards and financial solutions. Prior to joining the IDB, Isabelle was working for over 10 years in structuring investment products for a vast array of private and public financial institutions, including development banks and pension funds. And she has previously worked in Asia, Africa, and Europe. She holds a master's degree in business administration from the Lyon Business School in France. So Isabelle, the floor is yours.
And I am muted. Can you hear me now? And I think I need to put the... can you let me know if the audio is okay, if I did the right...
It's a little low.
Translation?
The sound is a little low.
Anyway. All right. So good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. So yes, I'm in the capital markets division of the IDB. So I do the financial parts of financing the water sector. And I'm really happy Diana started because she actually presents so well the benefit that green bonds can have for a water company. So I'm gonna present and try to link my presentation to everything she says, so that makes even more sense to you all. All right. And I apologize, we're going to do what we always do in our region. My presentation is in Spanish. I'm going to speak in English, and I know you've got translation in Portuguese, but that's more or less our life in the region, right? So, and that doesn't work. Let's see. Yeah, okay. So I'm going to focus now. I think Diana told you the journey of ACUEDUCTO de Bogotá to issue a green bond. I'm gonna focus again on what are those instruments and why are they so important in the water sector as a new source of, not so new, but yes, new source of financing, especially in our region. So those instruments are debt instruments, normal debt instruments. A sustainable bond is nothing else than a normal bonds with a special commitment in sustainability from the issuer. So basically you issue a bond, and if you issue a green bond or a social bond or a sustainable bond, you're going to issue the same bond with an additional commitment towards sustainability. There are different types of bonds and what we call thematic bonds or sustainability bonds. There are four different main instruments. The one that we're going to focus on today is the green bond, and basically green bonds are bonds that are issued to finance specific activities and projects that do have environmental positive benefits. But you also have social bonds, the same thing, but to finance activities that have a social benefit. And we will see that for the water sector, we usually have a mix of both, because your activities and your project usually have both green and social benefits. Then we can talk about sustainable bonds, which are basically a mix of green and social. So when you have a portfolio that has either environmental benefits or social benefits, you can use a sustainable bonds. And then we have a last new instrument, which is called a sustainability linked bond, which works a little differently. The first three, you can only use the proceeds of the bond to finance eligible activities, green activities, social activities. The sustainability linked bond works a little bit differently. You can use the proceeds of the bond for whatever you want, but you have to commit to a sustainable target. And if you don't reach the target, then the financial characteristic of your bond will change. Basically, you'll have a financial penalty, and your funding will be higher if you don't reach the target. For the moment, on the water sector, we do think that the green bond is the best fit for the sector, but I wanted to present to the whole series of instruments, because in the future, we may want to look at sustainability linked bond for the water sector. I just want to show you a little bit the market in the region and in the world, and show you how much, sorry, I'm just trying to fine tune this. Yeah, show you how much the water sector still has a lot of potential. So here you have the global market, so worldwide. And you see the extreme growth, the very exponential growth of the market. And you can see the different instruments. So on the left-hand side, you can see that green bonds are still more than 50% of the total of this sustainable. Sustainability and social have developed, especially in 2020 during the pandemic, because we realized that a social bond was a very good fit to finance the needs for emergency financing and recovery of the crisis. And then you see this little yellow part, which is the emergence of sustainability-linked bonds. And I want to talk about this because sustainability-linked bonds are especially a big success in Brazil. The Brazilian market uses a lot this instrument, so that's why I wanted to mention it. On the right-hand side, you can see that those same figures, but by sector. And so the water is a little yellow part, and you can see that the water is still not completely developed. We're not tapping into that potential yet. And why? Well, it's kind of intuitive. The market went and developed itself with the low-hanging fruit, right? The easier sector, which was energy, because all those renewable energy projects are a good fit for green bonds, right? That seems quite obvious. It's easy. It's the first thing you would think of when you think of a green bond. It's energy. The second one was building, especially for the European market. But then you can see that water is still, transport and water still have a lot of potential. This is the figures, but for our region, Latin America and the Caribbean. And here you can see the same exponential growth, even a steeper growth. Latin America and the Caribbean still represents a few percentage points of the total market. We think it's 4% this year, coming from 2%. But the growth is even quicker. So we think that proportion is going to grow quickly. And on the right-hand side, you can see who is issuing in our region, right? And you can see the two big thing is the sovereign, the green part here. And for the moment, we don't have a sovereign green or social bond or sustainable bond in Brazil. But for example, Chile has been using the instrument a lot. And for example, Chile has 20% of their debt, their sovereign debt is now more than 20%, 28%, I think, of their sovereign debt is now sustainable. Colombia has issued, Peru, Mexico, Guatemala, Ecuador. I'm not sure I forget any. But sovereign are a big part of those volume that are issued in our region. But the second one here is the corporate sector. And this is Brazil. Brazil is one of the three biggest thematic bond markets in our region with Mexico and Chile. But where Chile is very driven by the sovereign, Brazil is very driven by corporate. So you have a real, very active thematic bond markets in Brazil. Here, I have put for you a little bit the profile of each country in terms of issuing sustainable debt. And if you look at Brazil, Brazil is still a lot green, but you can see the huge proportion of sustainability link compared to other countries. And on the who is issuing part, as I was telling you, it's a very corporate market, which is very interesting because it means the market sees the use of this instrument in Brazil. Okay, so if we come back to the water sector, who can issue? The sovereign, so the finance minister can decide to issue a green bond instead of issuing a normal plain vanilla bond. The banks can also issue, and they've been issuing a lot. And if they have water loans in their portfolio, they can use the water loans to back the issuance of a green bond. The sub-sovereign level can issue also, and the water companies. So those water asset and portfolios can be used to issue at very different levels, depending on the country and the way it's structured in the country, right? Here are the benefits of issuing a green bond in the water sector. And here, this is what Diana has been presenting, right? You do it, why would you bother in doing all this? Well, because you're hoping to get a bit of funding, you're hoping to get a more diverse universe of investors coming to buy your debt, but also there are soft benefits, which is, and Diana, I think, was very clear about it, is you're basically transforming the sustainability into a subject for the whole company. Instead of having your sustainability team working in their, in their little corner, sustainability is now an issue for the finance department, is an issue for the operations. It's mainstreaming sustainability in your company, and that's really important. So what do we do on this, and what do I do? So in the last 5-6 years, the IDB decided to start supporting the development of those green and thematic bond markets. And so we've been providing 3 different things. The main thing that we provide is technical assistance. And so what we do is, for each potential issuer who wants to have a look at the instrument and see if it's a good fit, we basically help the issuer from the very beginning to the very end. So what we did with ACUEDUCTO in Bogotá, for example, is we helped the company identify the eligible portfolio. So those 158, I think, projects in ACUEDUCTO in Bogotá, we helped with the help of consulting firm, we helped go and identify. You have to identify the portfolio, the project, but you also have to identify the indicator that you're going to use to report. Because at the end, the commitment is to obviously only use the proceeds for eligible assets, but the commitment that is maybe the most important from the issuer is to report annually. So every year you're going to have to report how you've been using the money. And that is done, and the impact of that assignation of resources is done through indicators. So the first phase is you identify the project, and you identify which indicator you're going to use to report. And that's a very important point, because as you saw, when Diana showed the list of projects, I'm pretty sure that all the water companies who are listening to us just saw, perfect, I got that. It's basically the water sector is green, right? The importance is to see how we're going to demonstrate the impact of those assets. You need some indicators. Then once we have the portfolio, we help the issuer develop this framework. And so the framework is basically a document that presents the commitment of the issuance. So where you say, I commit that I'm only going to use the proceeds of this bond for those type of projects. This is how I'm going to do. I'm going to report annually. Those are the indicators I'm going to use to report. All this commitment you present in a document. That's the framework. And then that framework is going to have to go through an external review. We call it a second party opinion, SPO. And so once you have your document, your framework ready, the IDB would help you get that second party opinion. And once you have those 2 documents, the framework and the SPO, from a sustainability point of view, you're ready to go and issue. Now, I'm going to pause here because what Diana said is very important. There are 2 things here that needs to be looked at. First is the sustainability part. Do you have a green portfolio? Do you have the indicators? Can you prepare this framework and get the SPO? But at the same time, you need to work on the financial part. Can I issue a bond? Is my company allowed to? What kind of approval do I need to get to issue a bond? What kind of accounting system do I need? I mean, and this is independent from green or not green. It's really, can you issue a bond, right? And this part we can also help with if you need to. Some companies will need it. Some companies already issue, like Aguas Andinas in Chile is issuing regularly. And I'm not sure about the companies in Brazil, but some companies issue, some companies don't. And what we do, because we want to bring those companies to the market, so we have a big part of our technical assistance is to help first issuers come to the market and issue their first bond. Because as Diana was saying, there's a whole project there. You need to make sure you're ready to issue a bond. At the same time, what we do with the framework and the SPO is valid for bond. It's also valid for green loan. And so sometimes companies will decide that at the end, maybe a green loan is the right answer for them, but you can still use that work you've been doing to get the framework and the SPO. It's valid for the International Capital Market Association, so the debt markets, also valid for the LMA, the loan market. This is a technical assistance we do, then we go into the financial products. So depending on IDB is the public part of the IDB group, and IDB Invest is a private part of the IDB group. So we can provide guarantees, B bonds, we can do anchor investment in the bond, we can do revolving lines, and it really depends here about, you know, the private or public nature of the company. And last but not least, we do a lot of knowledge sharing and capacity building. We have a lot of programs around around this. This is quickly what all the bonds that we've been supporting in those years on the private side, IDB Invest, and the public side, IDB. I'm going to go quick on this. And this is that I think we will share the presentation, but this is exactly all the steps you have to go through to issue a green bond. And really what I want to say here is that the IDB is basically supporting you through each of those phases. So my main message here, and I think Diana did a very good job at convincing you already, is the water sector, because what we did when we started to work at the IDB on those subjects is it was the capital markets division, right? And so we started work with our natural clients who are the sovereign and the banks, the public banks. But then we went to see our sectorial division, and I started to work with Corinne, with the water sector in the IDB. And we realized very quickly that the sector itself is green. Everything you do, I mean, almost everything you do is green. So that would be a shame to take profit of that greenness of your business to get funding. So I'm going to go quickly on this because this is a taxonomy, the international taxonomy and the standards. And I just wanted to prove to you that the sector is green. But I think when Diana showed you those projects, I think it shows that most of the activities of a water company is green. You also, and I'm guessing I'm not teaching you anything new, that you have a direct link to the Sustainable Development Goals. And I just wanted to talk quickly about taxonomies and standards. So when you issue green bonds, you do have to comply with a taxonomy and an international standard. Usually the standards are done by the Climate Bond Initiatives, and they have very developed standards on water. But again, the conclusion we had with the first project we developed with ACUEDUCTO Bogotá, with another company in Colombia, now we're working in Peru, is that the standard is a very natural fit for the company in our region. This is all we have for you to, and we will share this. So all you have in terms of knowledge sharing and capacity building, everything we do. Again, we will share this, so you will have access to this. And that's it for me. So I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Isabelle.
Back to you, Corinne.
Thank you so much for the presentation and for sharing what the IDB does in this sector in particular. We are now going to proceed to our third panelist, Marcella Ungaretti from XP. I hope I pronounced the name of the company well. in Portuguese. Marcella is head of research ESG at XP, and she's also a partner there. She was trained in business administration by FEA USP, the University of São Paulo, was awarded the prize Rui Leme de Excelencia Académica from University of São Paulo as well. Marcella initiated her career in equity research at the Bank of America Merrill Lynch, and in 2018, she joined XP to assist with putting together a research team, and today she leads the ESG financing at XP. So without further ado, I will give you the floor, Marcella. The floor is yours.
Bom dia, muito obrigada. Obrigada a
Now,
todos.
good morning, everyone. Thank you. I'm happy to be here with you this morning to add to what Diana and Isabelle just mentioned. As you know, I work in research at XP, so we look at information of open or publicly held companies here in Brazil. So I believe I can add to the previous presentations and always connecting back to utilities. I believe that there is a lot of synergy. There's a lot of synergy with utilities because especially water, when you think of water supply, it is very much connected to sustainability and green. So I think that my view, the investor view, can add to this outlook we are building. So let me share my screen. Can you see it? Now, very briefly, when we think about the future and we think about ESG, environment, social, and governance, we can clearly understand that ESG investment will, at the end of the day, incorporate environmental issues, social issues, and governance issues. And we include that in our financial analysis, either when we look at green bond issues or, because we write recommendations on investments. So we analyze, of course, traditional economic and financial indicators, but we go beyond that to have a more holistic view of these corporations so that we have additional inputs, additional information to have a broader view of these companies. As we look ahead, we can clearly see that winning companies will be those that are already taking care of their behavior in relation to ESG. And in the very near future, those companies that do not take care of ESG will lag behind. Now, I think it is also nice to show you the relevance of ESG all around the world. So today, we have more than 35 trillion US dollars under management by funds that have defined a sustainable strategy. That is, these funds, as they allocate resources to different types of funds, they also look at ESG. And 35 trillion is already a very representative, a significant number. And when you look at the chart, the trend is upwards and it's been steep, and we believe it will continue to grow. Now, as we break down into regions, we can see that there are big differences comparing the regions in relation to their sustainability agendas. And as we look at the performance of these different regions, we can see that Europe and the United States are more advanced. They have made more progress than Brazil in this arena. So they have more funds under management based on strategic sustainability. That is, they have ESG included in their analysis and investment allocation. On the right-hand side, you have subscribers of PRI, which is a global institution that defines the principles for responsible investment. And you can see the number of subscribers, the number of investors who are already looking at these indicators. And it means that we have a whole capital inflow to companies that have this agenda as a priority. And this is true not only for investment, but also for financing, which we call debt. Now, this has already been mentioned, but I think it is interesting to emphasize that all of this transformation, all of this drive by investors, I mean, the money flows, the market flows are certainly oriented to these companies. And this is a transformation. We see companies that are undergoing this transformation to have access to this flow of capital. And when we think about reporting or in information publishing, it is key for companies to be able to report the right indicators, especially when we think about sustainability reports and ESG. They are mandatory only in 24% of stock exchanges around the world. And so when we think beyond the universe or the group of listed companies, then reporting is not required. So we believe companies can make progress in this avenue. We expect that on the one hand, more stock exchanges will require this kind of reporting. And on the other hand, we will see voluntary reporting. Looking at the bright side, although this is not mandatory for privately held companies, we see many who are publishing these reports voluntarily. If you look at the S&P, you will see 92% of companies reporting on these indicators, on sustainability indicators. So this is great, but of course we still see challenges ahead because we require more standardization to report this information, because today we still find 10-page reports from some companies and 100-page reports from other companies. If you look at the Brazilian market, you still see a lot of opportunity for standardization. When you look at utilities companies, we can see that they are making progress. But this is, because their business model requires a kind of management that is certainly more related, directly related to the environment and therefore to sustainability issues. So we see that utilities tend to be more advanced than other industries. But we can see companies making this transformation all over the market. And of course, this is not something you can do from one day to the next. It is a journey, an important transformation, and we expect to see more progress in the near future. And we believe that is the right way to go. And we expect more companies to also be able to address the challenges to tap the opportunities related to this agenda. We always talk about ESG, and the first thing that comes to mind are challenges, but the truth is that we see companies that are very well positioned to tap more opportunities. And in utilities, well, ESG comes much more as an opportunity than as challenges. Of course, we have to recognize the challenges, but the opportunities you have for utility companies as well as for investors to invest in this theme, in this industry, is, it is a huge opportunity. So it cannot be neglected. Now back to Brazil. I think it is interesting to, understand the have a global view and then narrow down to Brazil. So in Brazil, the ESG has already transformed the investment industry. Of course, when you compare Brazil to other more developed countries, we can see that Brazil is following suit. I mean, we are now gaining momentum. We are still only just beginning this journey, and so we still have a long way ahead, but we can already see good progress being made in this agenda. So when you look at the number of PRI subscribers, well, Brazil still represents less than 2% of the number of global subscribers, but I mean, we can see a clear evolution, a clear progress being made. So investors in Brazil, asset managers here are looking at ESG more and more. Actually, last month, we had a roadshow with institutional investors, and we could see they're highly interested in ESG. That was really clear in our roadshow. We see more asset managers in Brazil implementing ESG criteria in their research, in their analysis, and we believe there is a growing trend as the market matures in Brazil. Although we already see a relevant number, I mean, comparing to a couple of years ago, today we have more green bonds being issued by Brazilian companies. We see more companies interested in having green projects, as well as on the investor side. We see there's an increasing interest in investing in green projects. And that's why we tend to see more issues in the future, more green bonds being issued. Now, I think this is something important for us to talk about, the problem of greenwashing. So many of you who are participating in this meeting have probably heard this word, this terminology, greenwashing. So it means, and it's something that we see on the market as a whole. So we see companies talking about sustainability, they have an ESG speech, and so that is present. That is something you can see when, they're talking about that. But when you go one level deeper, then you don't really see true initiatives being taken, true actions being taken according to what has been said. And so that is why we say that it is important for companies to improve their documentation. This has already been mentioned, but also the second opinion, that is something that we must have in Brazil. That is somebody who is independent to validate the company's operations. This is certainly something investors highly value because, it's a second opinion to validate the project and to what extent it is really green. This is something that investors would consider a game changer because, we know that there is a lot of interest on the market to do some greenwashing, to talk about ESG because they know it is important, but that has to be backed by actions by companies. And so companies must have a clear structure of their operations to be able to provide transparency to the market. So we see that as key. And well, when we think about that, there are some reasons why it is important to care for ESG. I mean, why ESG matters. First, because investors are more engaged, and so there is capital flowing to these companies. Investors want to invest in these companies, either to buy debt or equity. That is a clear trend. And beyond investors, we have to also consider consumers' behavior, especially younger generations. They tend to view environmental issues as very important in their purchasing decisions or in their investment decisions. And companies can feel this impact. I mean, consumers also have their voice being heard. Companies can hear the consumer voice, and that's why they are more concerned to have a good governance. Secondly, regulations, especially when you think about water supply and sanitation, regulation is really significant in this industry. I mean, in many others as well, but in this industry, regulation is certainly very important. And increasingly, we see ESG criteria being included as required, as something required, especially when you think about B3, the Brazilian Stock Exchange. They have already announced they are studying, they are looking into requiring ESG. That is, they are thinking about having ESG requirements for listed companies. And so, because sometimes regulations tend to take longer. Usually investors and consumers, they are faster, we feel their impact first. So, but regulations will follow suit. And we believe we will have progress in the regulations in the near future. Now, when you implement ESG, when companies implement ESG criteria, is there any correlation in terms of performance and return on investment? What happens to the stock price? And what about the debt cost? So here at XP, we conducted some studies, some research to try and understand whether there is a correlation between implementing ESG criteria and the company performance. So we compared the performance of companies that have more progress in their ESG agendas, and we compared these companies to their benchmark. And we can see that companies that have implemented an ESG agenda have a better performance. I mean, we looked at groups of company, and when in the group of companies that have implemented an ESG agenda, we see a large number of utilities companies. Of course, ESG varies depending on the region, depending on the regulations in each region. But when you make a group of companies, we can see utilities usually have an advanced ESG agenda. So it is a key industry, it's a key sector when you think about the ESG agenda as a whole. Now, in closing, I believe ESG is a long journey. It is a process. It's not something that will happen from one day to the next. But we have seen progress being made in Brazil and elsewhere as well, even more. So when we research companies, we see that ESG is not something binary. It's not something that either you have it or not. ESG is something that, or if a company doesn't have it today, it means that it will not have in the future. No, ESG is a journey, and companies have been advancing and have now a better position than they had in the past. And investors have an eye on them. They pay attention to companies' ESG agenda. So we believe that ESG will continue to advance, and it will bring a lot of opportunities. And in utilities and the companies that provide public services, these companies are certainly paying attention to ESG, and investors too. So I believe we have a very promising outlook. I hope that my information was clear and it's been helpful to add to the interesting talks we heard before. Again, thank you for the opportunity for being here. Thank you.
Marcella, many thanks.
Thank you very much, Marcella.
Very detailed presentation. I think this is very interesting to know where we are with ESG, as it is a big trend right now, and in the US as well. And we will go to our last panelist, last but not least, Sophie Trémolet. Sophie is head of the potable water in Europe. She's based of water resources, in Europe. She's based in London. She leads the development and implementation of a European program on water resources that focuses on challenges that affect the health of rivers and water bodies as a whole in Europe. The main objectives are to increase the resilience of watersheds, restore, but also protect rivers, and identify renewable energy in a strategic way to avoid any negative impact, for instance, from the hydroelectric developments, for instance. Sophie joined TNC in Europe in 2018 after more than 20 years of experience in financial, institutional, and regulatory reforms in the water sector. She started her career as a consultant in NERA and also in ERM before managing a consulting firm. And she was a senior economist in the global water practice at the World Bank. She has a double master's degree in international affairs and economic development from Columbia University and political science in Paris. So without further ado, Sophie, the floor is yours. We will have 15 minutes for this presentation, and then we will go to question and answers for a short session as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Corinne. And you'll hear more English with a French accent during this session, and I will not share my Portuguese with you because that would be too painful. But so I'll go to the slideshow. Thank you for the introduction. Trying to get this into full screen. And okay, so I'm going to take a quite different perspective from what you've heard so far, but which is obviously very related. And we're going to focus on how do we build green programs for water utilities that they can mobilize green finance for. Because we heard, for example, from the Bogotá example that in the green bond program, there's a number of investments, most of which are green because we are in a green sector. However, we can do greener than green, and that would be nature-based solutions for providing water and wastewater services. So that's going to be the topic of my presentation. Here on this cover page, you have an example of such a nature-based solution. This is a constructed wetland that was built in Norfolk by the Norfolk Rivers Trust, which is a local NGO, in support of and in partnership with Anglian Water, a very large water company in the UK. And this constructed wetland is used to polish off the water as it comes out of the wastewater treatment plant before it goes back into a very sensitive river that is called the chalk stream aquifer, a chalk stream that takes its water from a chalk stream aquifer. So also, before I dive in, I just wanted to give you a very brief introduction about my organization. The Nature Conservancy is a leading global conservation organization which works on protecting the lands and waters on which all life depends, which means that we work on the twin challenges of climate and biodiversity protection, I'm sure that many of you would have heard of us in Brazil. We have a team in Brazil. We work in 72 countries. I'm based in London, and as Corinne mentioned, I'm in charge of developing our work on in Europe on freshwater issues, which include nature-based solutions as one of the area. Our vision for freshwater is one of moving from a degraded systems where there has been the impact of deforestation, overgrazing, intensive farming, urbanization, which are all taking their tolls on the functioning of natural ecosystems, leading to eutrophication, pollution, biodiversity loss, and climate degradation via emissions, to one in which we would have a much healthier, restored ecosystems, which includes improved grazing practices, regenerative agriculture, forestation, in order to restore the natural capacity of these ecosystems to treat water, to store water, and to deliver the ecosystem services that they've been delivering for millions of years, but that we have disturbed through human intervention. So what do we mean by nature-based solutions? I think you're probably familiar by now that there are actions to restore and protect ecosystems so that they can address societal challenges, water security being one of them, and contribute to restoring biodiversity or protecting biodiversity at the same time. So in this presentation, I'm focusing on those nature-based solutions that have an impact on water security challenges, which we define as water availability, disaster risk, i.e. flood risk, and water quality. And you can see this is based on an analysis conducted by the Nature Conservancy and reflected in a guide that we recently released. You have a link to that guide here. We classify those nature-based solutions in 4 main categories. One is to protect habitat, and that's very relevant, obviously, in the context of Brazil or Latin America, where there is a lot still of habitat to protect. In Europe, we're looking more at restoration when those ecosystems have been degraded. That's also unfortunately the case in Brazil and elsewhere in Latin America, but maybe less so in terms of balance, if you want, when compared to Europe. So we're looking at revegetation, riparian restoration, wetlands restoration, or floodplain restoration. A third category is that of management, because we understand that agricultural best management practices, for example, can improve the capacity of the soil to retain water in the ecosystem, and so therefore play a very significant role to address water availability, for example. So here are all the different types of best management practices. And then we can also look at created habitats. So the picture I showed you on the front page was that of an artificial wetland. There was a piece of agricultural land there before, but this wetland was created with a view to address all of these multiple areas, including water availability, quality, and disaster risk. And on the right-hand side here, you can see that an attractiveness of nature-based solutions is that they can generate multiple co-benefits. And these are summarized here. You've got all these 3 main types of water security benefits, but also related benefits with respect to climate change adaptation, climate change mitigation, of course, the restoration or protection of biodiversity, which is at the heart of nature-based solutions, but as well as social benefits related to human health and well-being, as well as creation of jobs and social cohesion. So in some way, the fact that nature-based solutions generate so many benefits is a blessing, but it's also a curse from a financing point of view. And this is where I'm coming on to the financing part of this presentation, because here you have a summary of the different benefits that these nature-based solutions generate, which are being generated for a multiple range of beneficiaries. So it's not a one-on-one relationship. And the fact that there are multiple beneficiaries means that there are multiple potential revenue sources that can be mobilized in order to pay for these nature-based solutions. It's great to hear from, the ACUEDUCTOS de Bogotá that they can invest in this type of solutions. In Brazil, obviously, Sabesp has been investing a lot in those solutions, in protection of ecosystems, because they can see the benefits of doing so on its bottom line and on the management of the water resources. However, there are other benefits which need to be valued because, in some way, there's no reason why the water company should be the only one having to pay through tariffs for these solutions. I think one important point that this is bringing up as well is that one should not always think in terms of other costs, additional costs related to those solutions, but one should also think about the reduction in investment costs and O&M costs for the water utility that this can generate, and that can be taken into account when evaluating the business case for these solutions. So the point here is that because it's quite complicated to identify how nature-based solutions can contribute to water security, and it's quite complicated to generate revenue streams for them, what we observe is that user-driven watershed investments, i.e. cases where water utilities have invested in those solutions, are a minute portion of total investments in the water sector. There's still extensive investment going into water across the board, including in Europe, where I sit, to address the needs that we all know about in terms of increasing wastewater treatment capacity, delivering water, etc. But the improvement nature-based solutions and so therefore the greener part of the investment programs are very underrepresented. So what my organization TNC is looking to do is to work on addressing precisely this point, is to see how can we enable other actors to invest at greater scale in nature-based solutions so that we can generate all these multiple benefits. And one of the approaches that we have developed over the last 22 years is that of a water fund model, which is basically a governance and funding platform that enables to bring together different key stakeholders that are standing to benefit from these solutions around common objectives and goals to tackle specific water security challenges through the implementation of nature-based solutions portfolios and sustainable watershed management. Setting up these kind of structures is quite complex. It requires work in terms of governance, in terms of science-based prioritization, in terms of finance mobilization, communication, and of course, implementation. But the good news is that we have established over 40 of these funds, some of which are in Brazil. You might have heard of the Camboriú Water Fund, for which we developed a whole business case which convinced the water utility to establish this fund and to invest upstream in the protection of its watershed through nature-based solutions. So all of these resources are captured in a water fund's toolbox. You have a site here in the how-to guide that I mentioned, which was launched very recently, back in March 2022. We also produced an NBS guide for water. Most of the ongoing slide, the ensuing slide, will be based on this guide. It's not yet publicly released, but it will be very soon. And then last but not least, we have established a technical assistance facility, the Nature for Water facility, which aims to support water utilities or other types of investors in water in the development of these watershed investment programs. And there is a call for projects open at the moment. I can share the details if you're interested, to receive what we call sponsored engagements, i.e. technical assistance with funding to prepare those kind of investment programs, consolidated investment programs in NBS. So why would you want to do this as a water utility? This, as I mentioned, is based on some of what we've done, and it highlights the different ecosystem services and, most importantly, benefits for water service providers that these solutions generate. Because I think quite often it's more of a conservation community that looks at NBS without necessarily looking or taking the point of view of a water company to understand how it can help the water company address its issues. So these are very similar to what was mentioned for Bogotá, and it sort of highlights that investing in those solutions, NBS solutions, alongside most of the time grey infrastructure solution, can help with increasing water availability, securing aquifers as strategic resources, reducing turbidity at water intakes, which is a major focus of our Nairobi Water Fund, for example, which then leads in turn to reducing drinking water treatment costs, and also helping the utility comply with their not only CSR, but also other very important goals in terms of biodiversity and carbon goals, which linking back to the previous presentation can therefore bolster their ESG performance. So this is just an example of a water fund that has been in place since 2017. Well, sorry, has been in place in the last few years, but the business case was launched in 2018. The creation of this water fund was prompted by the drought that hit Cape Town back then, and the risk that the city would reach day zero, which is basically the point at which they could not supply water to all of their inhabitants, 4 million inhabitants in the region of the Cape. So what we did at the time was to prepare a business case that showed that investing in a targeted manner in the removal of invasive species in 7 priority subcatchments, what you're seeing here, would be able to mobilize to restore in the system, if you want, great amounts of water equivalent to 2 months worth of water supply at a cost that is 1/10 of the next best available option, which is there was a desalination plan. But of course, you know, these increasing water yields that you see on the graph before can only take place if you not only invest upfront in the removal of invasive species, but also invest over time and in maintaining that ecosystem in a functioning state. So it's a very similar approach to that of a grey infrastructure. You need not only to think about your upfront investment, but also your ongoing investment in ensuring, in this case, that invasive species would not continue to spread. And the reason for this focus on invasive species is that these are pine, eucalyptus, acacias that have very deep root systems, which are effectively sucking out much more water than the traditional endemic fynbos vegetation in that region, which is much more superficial and therefore doesn't have great water needs because it's adapted to this scarcity situation, if you want. So in the next few slides, I just wanted to point out that examples exist for structuring transactions that can mobilize investment in nature-based solutions at scale. There are not many of them so far, but there are a healthy sort of set of solutions of that type. And we have, published this report that looks at how the different solutions have been deployed for different type of business lines for nature-based solutions that we believe have the ability to scale and be disseminated and replicated around the world. So one of those that attracts quite a lot of interest is that of managed aquifer recharge. So it's effectively looking at how we can use aquifers to store water and to manage the surface water in a way that also can be beneficial to wildlife. This photo is from an example in the US where the Nature Conservancy has been working together with a large fund investor, which has raised $927 million to invest in restoration of aquifers in a, I would say, commercial manner, i.e. they can draw down the groundwater and sell it, but at appropriate times so that it doesn't impact biodiversity and particularly migratory birds that are benefiting from wetlands restoration. This piece of land that you see here was previously an extensive, intensive cattle farm, which was obviously very detrimental to biodiversity and has been restored to a wetland state and infiltrating water into the ground so that it can be managed adequately. Another type of NBS, which we believe can scale up quite significantly, is that of adoption of agricultural best management practices in order to have an impact on water security. So I briefly mentioned earlier the case of the Nairobi Water Fund. This effectively is centering on the adoption, on working with farmers, 45,000 farmers upstream of the Nairobi water area, so that it can impact, reduce soil erosion, which has been impacting turbidity in the river of the Upper Tana and therefore causing significant issues for the downstream water treatment plant in Nairobi. It's also causing significant issues to KenGen, which is the hydropower company that is supplying the city of Nairobi. So that means that KenGen has been an investor into a water fund platform, which TNC contributed to set up, which draws in multiple funding sources from the government, from Nairobi Water, from corporate interests such as Coca-Cola or Frigoken, and from beneficiaries such as KenGen. So this fund is not mobilizing at the moment repayable finance, but it's a way of pulling in different funding sources and deploying those funding sources into, to cover the cost of a targeted investment program and distributing the funding to 45,000 farmers so that they adopt these improved agricultural practices. So it's really a way of pulling this together and investing in a more targeted manner. Another project that might be relevant and is relevant for another type of NBS that we believe has strong potential is that of wetlands creation and restoration. That's very hot, I would say, in the moment in the UK, because wetlands, when they're created in strategic place, can provide multiple ecosystem services in terms of water quality, flood risk reduction, biodiversity. They provide very, robust habitat for wildlife, and including birds and fish. And they can, as I mentioned in the introduction about the Anglian water case, provide benefits to water companies in terms of savings for water treatment and wastewater treatment, for example, and helping them meet their carbon and biodiversity goals. So the biodiversity offsets is a very big market, and it's one that has been used to fund a lot of wetland creation in the US. We estimate that it's multiple billion of dollars which are invested every year in wetland creation through mitigation banks in the US, and this is just an example of one mitigation bank that has is in activity in the US. It's the largest one in California, in order to and they're selling, if you want, biodiversity offset to credit buyers, which would be developers, for example, that need those credits in order to be able to develop sites. And these credits are effectively used to repay family offices, pension funds, and private equity, which invest in the mitigation bank in the first place.
Sophie, yeah. I'm sorry, I have to be the police here, unfortunately. I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up if you can, yes, because we have little time left. Thank you.
So these are just, other examples. One of them was a green bond as well that was launched in the Netherlands with a 20-year sovereign bond. So just to say that there are examples in Europe of green bonds that have included both grey infrastructure and NBS, which can be looked at, the Netherlands being one, and Anglian Water being another one of the company that has been mobilizing most of its finance now through green bonds and is planning to do so in the future. So I'll end here. I hope that was helpful, and I don't know if I have any time left for discussion or if we have to wrap up. Thank you.
Many thanks, Sophie. I appreciate it. We have very little time left for question and answers, but at least I'd like to ask you at least one question to each of you, and we will have also some questions from the audience, and I will start with Marcella. Regarding the ESG financing, we had a question from the audience asking if ESG financing makes it easy to obtain financing. Is it easy for a company that applies the ESG aspects? Is it easier for them to obtain financing on that basis? And also, how a company can demonstrate that it is following the ESG principles. Good. Thank you, Marcella.
Ela. About the first question, can you hear me?
The sound is a little low. I don't know if you can get closer to the...
Sorry.
Oh, much better. Much better.
Boa, obrigada. Desculpa, gente.
Thank you. I'm sorry. The headset was in my back. I'm happy you can hear me now. So when we think about companies that are well positioned in the ESG agenda, if that has any impact on their capacity to obtain financing, what we can see is that companies that are more advanced in ESG, these are higher quality companies. Why? Oh, well, because they can manage their risks well. So that means they are resilient. They are well positioned to capture more opportunities. So that makes these companies more attractive to obtain financing. When we think about the cost of debt or even the cost of equity, there are studies showing these companies have lower cost of financing. Why? Well, because they show they have a better capacity to manage their risks. And that is attractive for investors. So, of course, we cannot say this is a rule. It is not something that applies to all cases, but the fact is that we do see that these companies that are well positioned in the ESG agenda, they can also attract investors more easily, and when they have this structure for green financing, well, then they can attract this kind of investing. About the second question, how do we know whether a company is well positioned in the ESG agenda and how can it tell the market? Well, first, as market analysts, we try to understand what is the industry where that company operates. So ESG talks about this, in fact. Depending on the industry, each one of the three pillars may be more relevant. When you think about sanitation, for example, we believe that the environmental pillar, has a huge relevance. Of course, social and governance are also important. Governance is important for all kinds of companies, for all organizations. But so after we can understand the industry, the true relevance of each one of the three pillars, depending on the company's industry, then we try to understand what are the most relevant topics in each pillar. So waste management, energy efficiency, the water use, all of that is important for companies in many industries, but so for each one of the pillars, the E, the S, and the G, we try and look at the performance indicators, so how the company is performing. For instance, as you look at water use. How is the company using water? Does the company have indicators that show a positive performance or challenges that the company is facing? And again, what are the initiatives taken by the company to improve its performance in a specific topic or to capture an opportunity that may be present for that company? For us, researchers, market researchers, we prepare company reports. That is, we read a lot about the companies, we study the company documents, the reports published by the company to the market. And then again, we talk to the managers of the company, we talk to other market analysts so that we have a broader understanding of where the company is positioned in the long ESG journey. And again, what are the prospects for the future? So if the company is standing at a certain position in this ESG agenda, is the company investing and setting up new initiatives to advance more, or the opposite? Is the company reducing investment in that agenda? So this is our job, talk to investors, tell them what our view is. And we do that by having a very close relationship with companies, especially publicly held companies in Brazil. I hope it's clear. Yes, it is. Thank you.
For answering the question. I will continue with Isabelle with one question, and I would ask you to answer very concisely in the interest of time. How do you compare the water and sanitation sector and the bond issuance in this sector with other sectors in the region? Is it really an incipient mechanism, an incipient phenomenon, I would say, to start issuing green bonds in water and sanitation, in the water and sanitation sector, with respect to other sectors that may have done that for some time? And also, is the strategy there to increase the resilience of the water and sanitation sector, or other reasons?
Can you hear me?
Yes, a little low as well, but I can hear you.
I'll try to. I think we can answer the question, both myself and Diana. On my side, what I can say is, yes, the water sector is very incipient, and there's a lot of potential to be developed in green bonds in the water sector. So I think, if I'm not misunderstood, in our region, for the moment, I think only 2 or maybe 3 water companies have issued green bond, not even. And obviously the sector that has been starting this market is the energy sector, right? And the transport, because clean transportation is green by essence, right? If you do any metro, bus, any public transportation project, is very easily financeable with a green bond. So energy and transport were the 2 first sector to kick off those markets. I do see a lot of potential in the water sector. My problem is, in the water sector, it's more not the financial side. The green is green. I mean, this sector is super green. So I don't have any doubt on this. What I say is the market is made of a lot of small companies, because basically it's and here you can see I'm not a water sector specialist, but basically you have one company for the big city, and then you have one company for each little city, right? And that's going to be more of a challenge for the little ones, because we want to bring them to the market, but they're going to have to do a lot of readiness activities before they can issue a bond. And we're not talking green bond. We're talking about issuing green bonds. So, but this is the role of the multilateral, right? We want to help those that really need us to get to the market. On the resilience, and I think Diana maybe can also talk about this, what we've done with our 2 pilots in Colombia is we've tried to see if their green bond issuance could comply with the resilience principles from the Climate Bond Initiative. And the answer is yes. And that adds a lot of value to the issuance, because there is a lot of demand for adaptation resilience instruments.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Isabelle. I don't know. I will repeat the question for Diana then. Diana, for the water utility, do you see issuing a green bond as a strategy to increase resilience for water and sanitation within the utility? And I will add to that a question regarding, you mentioned several challenges in structuring the bond that were really within the utility itself. Are there challenges that go beyond the utility that you need to tackle? Any challenges you may have faced outside of ACUEDUCTO in order to structure this bond?
Thank you, Corinne. Well, the water sector is very incipient in Colombia. Green bonds issue, previous issues have been more related to energy, mainly energy and also transport, as Isabelle mentioned. I think we have an advantage in Colombia, and is that the government of Colombia has prioritized the development of green financing as well. The government of Colombia issued their first green financing last year, and it was very successful with green treasury bonds, exactly. And after that, the Financial Superintendency of Colombia developed and published the green taxonomy framework. So I think we have a sound regulation in Colombia that is developing towards incentivizing the development of the green financing. And I think this is a great opportunity for our utility company to take advantage of this opportunity, of this sound regulatory framework. And we are continue to make our own journey to be ready to issue a green bond, and we are really looking forward to that. We really believe that we are very, very well placed, that our company has all to do with be resilient to climate change, to protect the water resources. So we are really committed to green financing, more as an instrument of become a better company in the development of the ESG goals.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Diana, for those inputs. And we will finish with Sophie then. Sophie, you mentioned in your presentation that some of the challenges that were some of the benefits could also be curse, right? You have to deal with multiple actors, multiple revenue sources. Are there any other challenges that you see besides those that can arise from structuring a water fund, for instance? Yeah, I'm assuming that the political aspect is also very, very important in structuring a water fund.
Yeah, the political aspect, we're just going through that. Actually, in England, we're structuring one in Norfolk, where this wetland was located. And indeed, this is something where you do need to, bring everybody on board and highlight what the benefits can be, and that can be done through science-based prioritization. I think some of the other obstacles are related to regulatory obstacles. So even though you may have an economic regulator, in the case of England, which is pushing for the adoption of NBS because they realize the benefits that this can generate, both for the bottom line of the water companies, but also for the environment, you may have, complicated situations in which the environmental regulator is not allowing or is the creation of wetlands for permitting issues because it doesn't fit the right box. So the regulation is sometimes not moving fast enough in order to allow a real scale up in those solutions. That might be easier when we're talking about ecosystems protection. Of course, the regulatory context will vary from one NBS to another. And in some cases, regulation can be a driver for the adoption of NBS. So the case I mentioned in the US, where the Groundwater Act in California is the regulatory driver that enabled this type of investment and valuation of groundwater resources to take place.
Great, thank you so much. I guess regulatory aspect is key in all these projects as well. I would like to thank all the panelists for their time, for their participation. Thank the audience as well. And before we close, I would like to invite Luis Eduardo, who would like to say a few words.
Obrigado, Corinne. Eu gostaria de agradecer a todas as palestrantes.
Thank you, Corinne. I'd like to thank our speakers. And I want to thank you for your excellent moderation. That was great. I also want to thank the organizers of the Brazil Water Week. This session with women was just great. I just have no words to describe it. The content was extremely valuable. I'm Luis Eduardo. I am director at ABIS, and I'm also a director in the Water Resources Chamber here in Brazil. I mean, I've participated in the organization of these sessions and talking about, financing what we've had here. I mean, this session was amazing because it provided a very valuable content, and I'm sure it will inspire policies, actions, and investment in water, sanitation, and other related projects. Now, as we close, I want to thank Mara Ramos. Mara, are you online? Can you please switch your camera on so we can see you? I want everyone to meet you because Mara also participated in the organization and also providing technical support to this meeting, right, Corinne? She was really important. Mara, if you're in line, we want to see you. We want to see you so that we can thank you. Yet another woman to bring top-notch quality and excellence to this session. One more time, thank you. Thank you, Mara. And let me tell you that we will make this video available on ABIS YouTube channel if you want to see it again or share with friends. Also at ABIS website, you can have access to the complete agenda of our webinars. I've also put it on the chat. So be tuned to our ABIS agenda. Tomorrow, we will have a special session at 10 o'clock in the morning talking about ESG index. So that's going to be the ESG ABIS indicator. It's also very interesting. We call it a special session because they are the sessions that come previously before the Brazil Water Week. That is the most important event on water and sanitation that will take place next week from May 23 to May 27, and it's going to be online on an interactive platform. And about financing, and Corinne also helped me participating in this organization, we will have two sessions. On Tuesday, we will have a session about the required conditions for sanitation projects and how to structure new concessions. That will begin 3:30 BRT. And on Thursday at 10:45 BRT, Brazilian time, we will be talking about financing instruments and the challenges for us to build our new legal framework for sanitation in Brazil. So do visit our website and enroll to the Brazil Water Week. On June 25 to July the 1st, we will have the 20th Symposium for Portugal and Brazil on environmental and water engineering, talking about water and sustainability, challenges and actions. So you can also have access to this website through the link on our chat. Final message, join ABIS. Come strengthen the sanitation industry. If you want to join ABIS, come to our website. Click on the link showing now on your window and come with us, come along with this team of professionals in this industry. Thank you all very much for being with us, and we will continue to meet in our next week activities. Corinne, thank you very much. This session has been amazing.
Thank you, Mara, for the technical support. Thank you, Ana Paula, as well, and the organizers at ABIS. Thank you so much for having us.